All right. Well, hey, let's go ahead and get started. So today, what we're going to be going over is self-awareness and honest self-evaluation. So as you can see, the tagline there, you can't change what you don't notice. Okay. So this is kind of a twofold conversation. So on one hand, it's beneficial to be able to control your awareness so that you can focus on the right thing at the right time. The other aspect of that is it's beneficial to have the awareness so you can evaluate yourself well. Does that make sense? Okay. So to begin with, I want you to be able to evaluate your game with honesty, okay, and objectivity. Who knows what objectivity means? Go, Connor. No bias, yes. So most people, in general, are unnecessarily hard on themselves when they evaluate their success. Would you guys agree with that? Do you guys have a tendency to do that to yourselves potentially? Yeah. Okay. So that's where that objectivity comes in. You also don't want to be unnecessarily on your own side. Be like, yeah, hey, I didn't really pay attention, but it was okay. You don't want to be too biased on that way either. So you need to be very objective. Okay. You need to be able to understand how awareness can lead to that reflection. All right. How awareness leads to smarter training and how you can develop habits of reflection and adjustment. All right. So this is the goal of today. With that, we're going to begin with a little story. So taking away from that book again, just like the same book that we talked about on Tuesday, Zach Sorensen, mental performance coach for the Cleveland Guardians, early 90s. Okay. And he talks a little bit about scouting reports. His first year in the minor leagues, he was kind of struggling. All right. Everybody's been there, had a bad year with baseball. He really wasn't hitting all that well. And any day that he did hit well, he struggled on defense. Any day he struggled on defense, he hit well, but he couldn't fit it all together. And so he finally got to the point where his manager came up to him after a game and said, "Hey, I'm giving you tomorrow off. Don't even worry about it. Matter of fact, I don't even want you to show up early. Don't even show up till game time. And actually, when game time comes, don't even be wearing your cleats. You're not getting in no matter what. You're getting the day off. You need a mental reset." So, of course, Zach, being the competitor that he is, was frustrated by that in more ways than one. He didn't want to just get some time off. He wanted to fix whatever he was struggling with, right? So he was kind of frustrated in a lot of ways. He's like, I want a chance to make the play. I want a chance to get the hit. I don't want this time off. Okay? And so, anyway, game time comes. He listens to his coach, doesn't show up till 7. He's down at the end of the dugout pouting because he doesn't get to play, no cleats on, gets no chance of potentially even getting into the game. Mid-game, his manager at the time, I think it was double A, maybe single A, comes up to him and says, "Hey, what's your problem?" And Zach says, "Well, I have several problems. First of all, I'm having a hard time catching the ball. And second of all, I can't figure out how to steal first base." So at the end of the day, his manager is like, "Okay, this mental day off is actually not helping you at all. You're just sitting down at the end of the dugout and stewing. This is not working, right? Come see me in my office after the game." And I don't know how many of you guys have been in a situation where you've been called to a coach's office. How many? Anybody? Has anybody ever been called to a coach's office? It's terrifying, right? Unless you know for a fact that it's a good reason. You could have done nothing wrong your entire life, and coach says, "Hey, come see me in my office," and your heart's going to sink a little bit, right? You're going to be scared just a little bit. All right. So sure enough, Zach's like, "Well, my career's over. I'm going to get fired. I'm going to get, kicked off the team or whatever, or I'm going to get released, right? It's not going to go well for me." But anyway, he ends up coming, and his manager's like trying to kind of console him in a lot of ways of saying, "Hey, you're too hard on yourself and you don't need to be," right? The manager says, "Hey, I see a lot of myself in you," right? And they're basically saying like, "Hey, let's do this. Let's do this as a practice for the next little bit. You're too hard on yourself, so you write down a reflection based off of your game, and then I'll write down my reflection." Because in the minor leagues, managers will have to write reflections on players and send them to the front office of whatever organization they work for. Okay? And anyway, day after day after day, they did this for about a month, where Zach would write down his reflection on the game, and then he'd go the next day and overview it with his manager. And basically every single day he'd focus on, well, I made an error, but I got a hit. I struck out a bunch, but I made that good play in the middle. Right? That's what Zach was focusing on. His manager, on the other hand, he was focusing on, Zach's effort was really good today. Even though he struggled defensively, he was a really good teammate. Right? The manager and Zach were focusing on different things, right? When it comes to their awareness, when it comes to what they're paying attention to. Okay? And really what it came down to is it came down to the fact that Zach was focusing on his results, okay? And his manager was focusing on his effort, his attitude, and his energy, all right? When it comes down to what's going to get you an opportunity, a lot of the time it comes down to that, right? Of course the results matter, but when it's an even playing field, everybody is at the same level, it's the effort, attitude, and energy that you bring to a team that's going to set you apart. That makes sense, right? Out of all the other shortstops in the organization, that's what they were looking at. They weren't looking at the fact that he hit whatever or he, fielded this percentage. They were looking at those aspects because they needed him to be a leader on the team. Does that make sense? But at the end of the day, what eventually this came to, Zach started to realize, like, hey, the way that the manager is looking at my performance is a lot better than the way that I look at my own. And eventually it got to the point where Zach knew that every team in the league, every person, every coach in the organization had a scouting report on him. He's the only person in the organization that never got to see it, right? The same thing's true in the major leagues, right? Players don't get to see their own scouting reports. A lot of the time they don't, right? But all their coaches have them, and every other opponent that they're playing against have their scouting report, which is kind of weird, don't you think? Like, everybody knows how you play. Everyone knows how you look except for you, right? Which doesn't really make sense. But eventually, Zach was like, hey, can you do something for me? I know this is going to be weird, but can you actually print off the scouting report that you have on me and give it to me? And his manager was a little hesitant at first because, anytime that the scouting report is basically just all the things that the guy sucks at, right? All the things that they're not good enough at. Yeah, it's going to say some nice things, but even more so, it's going to point out, like, hey, these are the things that are keeping him from making it to the major leagues, right? Anyway, he finally agrees to it, and the next day he comes in and hands Zach about 50 sheets of paper, okay? Zach finally sits down eagerly in the morning, or not the morning, it's like 1 p.m. for a 7 p.m. game, and just starts reading it, right? His manager comes back by a little bit later and says, so how you feeling? Kind of expecting him to be a little down in the dumps. He just read 50 pages about why he's not good enough to be a Major League Baseball player. You'd think he'd be a little discouraged. But Zach turns to him and says, I actually feel rejuvenated, right? I know objectively, right, what I need to do, how I need to improve in order to get to where I want to go, right? It's no longer me beating myself up, and it's not me focusing on how many hits do I need to get in the next week before I'm hitting 300, right? It's not how many errors have I made and how can I make up for the mistakes that I've made. It's like, no, this is the objective data. This is what I need to get better at, right? This is what I need to improve upon, right? And he's able to focus on the right things, okay? He's able to focus on his effort, his attitude, and his energy because that's what's going to help him get to the next place, okay? But anyway, we kind of need to take that with ourselves, right? That same idea. We can develop personal scouting reports. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but the important aspect of that is Zach looked at this and said, not the fact that, oh, hey, he can't handle breaking balls, right? He knows when he does handle breaking balls well. He's able to reframe that statement, not the fact that he can't hit a breaking ball is keeping him from the major leagues. Instead, he says, if I sit back and keep my hands back and stay through the inside of an off-speed pitch, I'm going to be able to handle it well. He knows for a fact. He's reframing that negative statement that, hey, you suck at hitting breaking balls, to a positive one of this is what I have to do in order to achieve that. All right, remember that for a little bit later because we'll talk about that reframe statement a little bit as we go, okay? So a couple key concepts I wanted to talk about today. I want you to think about the mirror, this self-evaluation, right? This personal scouting report as the start of growth. All right, this is where we have to begin. All right, self-awareness. Does anybody have an idea of what that means? You have an idea? Self-awareness. Anybody? It's not a quiz. You don't have to. Very good. Very good. It's knowing your strengths, your weaknesses, and your triggers. All right, what is going to make you spiral? What are you especially sensitive to? Right? You have to be able to be aware of these things to protect yourself against them. Does that make sense? Honest feedback, on the other hand, that's going to be seeing what's true, not what's comfortable, right? That's also not what you've been conditioned to believe, okay? Because a lot of people naturally, they focus on the results because that's what they've been taught from the time that they were little. It's like, hey, it's not the effort that was put in. It's not the quality of swing that was put in. It's whether or not you got a hit, right? If that's been ingrained in you from the time that you're little, right, that's all that you're going to believe. Does that make sense? Okay? But at the end of the day, that's not honest feedback. That's not fair, right? You could hit the ball as hard as you want to. You could hit 100 miles an hour every single time, and it might still get caught, right? You could put the right pitch in the right location, and it still get hit. That's not on you. That's not honest feedback, right? The fact that you did what you set out to do should be success. Does that make sense? Okay. Focus. That is channeling your awareness to where it matters most or where you want it to. All right? And then reflection, on the other hand, that is turning every rep or game into feedback. You know, we really focus on that in here. Okay? We want you to get at least three types of feedback for every throw you make as often as possible, right? We want to see how you felt, where the ball went, and how hard it went, right? So that's 3 types of reflection that you can get. And we want you focusing on the right thing at the right time, okay? But now at the end of the day, we need to be able to kind of discuss these a little bit more in depth. So we're moving on to the discussion aspect, okay? And I want you to think about this, and then if you want to share it out loud, feel free, okay? Raise your hand and feel free. What's your biggest strength right now as a baseball player, as a person, as an athlete? What's your biggest strength right now? If you don't want to share, don't worry about it. But if you do, feel free. Go ahead. Consistency. Okay. Anybody else have any ideas? When you look in the mirror, what is your biggest strength? What sets you apart? What is one weakness that might be holding you back? Again, if you don't want to answer this, that's fine. But if you do, feel free to share. Go for it. Quality sleep. Okay, so you're consistent with showing up, but not consistent with the sleeping, huh? All right. All right. Good. How often do you guys reflect on practices or games? You guys just move on right to the next thing, right? As soon as the game happens, you're like, all right, moving on. Good or bad, we're just moving on, right? Or do you actually kind of sit and think about what went well, what went bad, how to adjust things for next time? All right, just some questions for you guys to ponder on your own. Okay. Now we're going to go back to that personal scouting report. I kind of want you guys to think through this with me, okay? And if you guys have your phones on you and want to follow through and actually do this on your phone, feel free. If not, then you'll just go through it mentally. To begin with, I want you to list your top 3 strengths as a player. Okay, think that you are a scout, right? You are no longer yourself. You are a scout that is looking at you. You can be a college scout, you can be a high school scout, you can be a major league scout that's watching you play a game. All right, think about what are your top 3 strengths as a player. Moving on from there, I want you to list your top 3 weaknesses. What weaknesses would a scout look at and write down? Taking one of those weaknesses, I want you to write a reframe statement. For example, for me, I knew that if I left my fastball up in the zone, right, one of my weaknesses is I did not throw very hard. Okay, so I knew for a fact if I left my fastball up in the zone, damage was going to be done. Okay, but instead of telling myself, hey, don't leave the ball up, don't leave the ball up, right? What I would tell myself is if I throw the ball to my intended zone, more times than not, things are going to go well. If I get ahead and I'm able to mix my pitches, I'm going to be able to keep the hitter off balance. That way, I'm reframing this true statement to another true statement that is positive. Does that make sense? Both of them are the same. The fact that if I leave balls up, they will get hit is just as valid as the fact that if I land strikes in the intended zones and are able to mix my pitches well, I'll keep hitters off balance. Both of those are equally true. Does that make sense? But one of them becomes empowering, right? Shows me what's in my control. The other one just basically negates my responsibility. Okay? So try to write a reframe statement for at least one of your weaknesses. And if anybody wants to share theirs, feel free. If not, we'll move on here in a couple minutes. Now that we have that reframe statement, I want you to identify one action step, one thing you can actually do to put that reframe statement into action. Whether that's something that you can consistently tell yourself to try to fix one of your weaknesses, right? Whether it's something you can adjust about the way that you work, right? For example, using Connor's example, if one of the weaknesses he put, right, was the fact that he doesn't sleep enough, right? That's one of his weaknesses as an athlete. He could put a reframe statement and says, hey, when I put my priorities in order and I get my stuff done when I need to, right, I'm able to go to sleep at a reasonable hour, right? Then an action statement is maybe he writes a nighttime checklist for himself, nighttime routine to make sure that he knocks everything out as soon as he can so that he can prioritize going to sleep better. It's not just identifying the fact that he doesn't go to sleep on time and then moving on and just living life knowing that he's going to continue to make that mistake. Does that make sense? He's able to develop and use an action statement. Okay? Feel free to steal that if you want to, all right? All right, moving on. So now application aspect here. There's going to be 3 different aspects that we're talking about, okay? One is going to be prepare, compete, and progress, okay? So when we're preparing, that's going to be something that we do pre-game, all right? We're going to start with a start, stop, continue, all right? This is a way that you can kind of reflect on previous days, previous practices, previous, experience as an athlete, and figure out what you need to do differently, okay? So start, stop, continue. This is a way that you can make it a habit to reflect, to adjust your awareness, and make sure you're focusing on the right things on a consistent basis, okay? So with start, stop, continue, you're going to analyze your current routine. So basically just how you're going about your day-to-day life, how you're going about your training, how you're going about those things. Think about what should you start doing, right? What are you not doing now that you need to start doing? For example, do you get distracted? Do you make things bigger than they are? In game, do you get, overwhelmed in the moment? Maybe you need to start just playing the game one pitch at a time, right? Or taking this off season one day at a time, okay? What's something you should stop doing? Something that's not helping you, not leading you towards your goals. Maybe you should stop worrying about getting recruited, or stop worrying about getting called up or hoping I make varsity. Stop worrying about it and just put the work in, okay? Worrying about it doesn't help you. It just hurts you, it distracts you. That makes sense? The worrying, maybe just stop worrying. Okay? And what should you continue doing, right? What are you doing well that you need to continue, right? Maybe you've been consistent and you need to continue staying consistent. Moving on to compete. I want you to think a little bit about competition when you guys are at your best. What does it look like? What does it feel like? You individually. It's going to look differently for everybody. Like, for example, me and Thomas, we look very different when we're competing. We had the chance to play together for a season, okay? And oftentimes we would pitch back to back, right? Not all the time, but often we'd pitch back to back. And he was much more intense than I was. I was much more reserved than he was, right? But think about that on a controlled intensity scale. So 1 is almost asleep. 10 is about ready to run through a brick wall. Think football player right before the game starts, right? Where do you fall? Where do you compete best? I knew for a fact that I competed best at like a 2 or a 3, right? If you just zoomed in on my face, you probably couldn't tell if I gave up a grand slam or struck out the side, right? I was just there. I was just zoned in, calm, cool, and collected. Thomas, on the other hand, from the get-go, he would always compete best at an 8 or a 9. He'd be almost ready to run through a brick wall, bringing the energy out the gate, okay? But kind of reflect on where you compete best, okay? Couple ideas, couple thoughts for what it feels like to be controlled, what it looks like to be controlled. Confident, consistent, calm, unfazed, even keel, emotionally stable. Those are the things that made me good at what I did when I played. Words for intensity: grit, passionate, conviction, driven, cutthroat. Okay? But what I want to challenge you to do is next time that you're competing here in a couple months, or even while you're going about your training, check in with yourself regularly and figure out where you're at. Okay? And whether or not you need to calm yourself down or amp yourself up in order to get the most out of yourself. Right? If it's a high intent day, right, when we work ourselves back up to full drill days, if it's a high intent day and you know you're a 9 out of 10 guy, you have to be able to take yourself there, right, when you're training. Okay? Now, I'm not saying you got to do that every time that you train, but when, right, the prescribed exercises call for it, we need to be able to take ourselves there. Okay? Moving on to progress. So prepare, compete, progress. This is post-game, post-training, post-practice. This is a well, better, how. All right? This is how you reflect on what you just did. Okay? You can do this with a training session. You can do this with a practice. You can do this with a game. Okay? Think about, what did you do well? What do I want to do better? And then how am I going to do it? A little caveat here, a little teaser for ones in the future. What's 1% of a day in time? Does anybody know? Time-wise, 1% of a day is 14 minutes and 24 seconds. So if you want to commit 1% of your day to getting 1% better at whatever you say you want to get better at, that's your how. Okay, you're going to spend 14 minutes and 24 seconds working on whatever you want to do. We'll talk more about that later, but that's a little teaser for you. And then another little caveat, another little teaser is some important things that you can do to kind of contain that reflection, right, to allow you to discard it. A rule that I used to use is I used to use the jersey rule. Is as long as I was still caught up in the game, I kept my jersey on. Even if that meant that I went home in my pants and my jersey, right? Because as soon as I took that off and stepped in the shower, that game was over and I'm moving on to the next one. If I wasn't ready to let go of it, I'm wearing it, right? There's one game in particular where I lost the game on one pitch that I slept in my jersey that night. That funny, Connor? Yeah. Yeah, grand slam on one pitch. I literally, it's so frustrating. But anyway, I wasn't ready to let the game go yet, all right? So I kept it on until I was ready to move on, okay? Another, way to kind of do that is a 1 hour rule of saying like, okay, hey, after the game ends, you got 1 hour, right? It doesn't matter if you wear your jersey, doesn't matter whatever, but you have 1 hour to kind of do it. This matters more, especially for people who make this their career, right? So once I transitioned to coaching, I kind of followed the 1 hour rule a little bit more, because at the end of the day, when my girlfriend, now wife, would want to call me after a game, I couldn't be still caught up. I had to be boyfriend, right? I didn't have time to be frustrated coach. I had to be there for her. Does that make sense? All right, so a couple different ways that you can kind of put a cap on that reflection to make sure that it stays healthy, right? You don't need to just be, frustrated in your reflection over and over and over all day, okay? A couple ways that we can train this. So a lot of the time when I say like focus and awareness and the fact that you should pay attention to that and be able to like train it, people kind of think, how am I going to train my focus? Right? How do I focus on or train not getting distracted? Well, we're gonna practice that real quick right now. Okay, I'm gonna show you 2 different ways that you can train it. Okay, first one here. Go ahead and close your eyes for me. Just sit where you are. Close your eyes. I want you to let all the sounds, all the droning of the heaters, all the lights fade away, and all you can hear is my voice. I want you to slowly pay attention to any sensations that you feel in your body. Your arms resting on your legs, your feet, are they on the ground? Are they crossed over one another? Now I want you to bring attention to your left foot, wherever it is, however it is sitting. More specifically, bring your attention to your left big toe. As you pay attention to it more, almost imagine that it's getting warmer. That level of attention that you're bringing to that big toe is higher. That same intensity of focus, I want you to take it and shift it to your right ear. Not the whole ear, just the tip, the very top of your ear. Focus so hard on that area that you can imagine the slightest wind coming across it. Finally, I want you to shift your attention to your right hand. I want you to go through your fingers from your thumb to your index, to your middle, to your ring, to your pinky. And I want you to go ahead and come on out of it. Open your eyes. Open your eyes. So as simple as that was, right? But the ability and the practice of shifting your focus from place to place to place to place to place within your body internally is in a way going to help you translate that to shift your focus to the appropriate thing externally, right? Does that make sense? Okay, and it's going to help you control your thoughts, all right? Because if your thoughts and your frustrations and your emotions are pulling you one direction, we're going to talk about emotional control on Thursday. But if your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions are pulling you in a different direction than where you need to be focusing on in the given moment, that's something that we need to practice, right? And that's a simple way to do it. That's like a simple, almost meditation of just practicing, shifting your focus place to place to place. The better that you get at doing that internally, the better you're going to be able to handle that externally. Does that make sense? The next way to train this is a concentration grid. What's nice about this is if you just Google concentration grid, you can find hundreds of them online on your own, okay? They're also very easy to make if you just know how to use Excel a little bit. But for example, I'm going to show you all a concentration grid here, and we're just going to go for a minute, okay? And all we're going to do is going from 00 to 99. I want to see how far you can get. Go. Do not skip any numbers. Go 00 to 99. Keep going, see how far you can get. See how far you can get. Keep pushing, don't stop, don't stop. Time. How far did everybody get? Did anybody get all the way to 99? No. 0 and 2? 0 to 2, there you go. How far did anybody else get? 16? Nice, not bad. 7? Fair. So typically, a normal one of those takes about 5 minutes to get all the way through. Like, that's a pretty good time, getting 0 to 99. But being able to pay attention to that for that amount of time on one task, on one skill, like staring at those numbers, is actually a valuable skill. I used to train that, especially when I worked with hitters. We used to have that to be one of our hitting stations. This is the entire hitting station. You would just sit there, right? And it's like, hey, everybody else is hitting the whole time, but how many concentration grids can you get through in 15 minutes or whatever it is? And it would be a competition against the people in your group, okay? But being able to train focus, that's another way that you can train it, okay? A couple different ways that we can also apply this to our real life, okay? In addition to being able to shift our focus anytime that we want to because we practiced it, right, like we just did, right, it'll be important for you to be able to double down on your focus when necessary, right, 30 seconds at a time, all right? I like thinking of this as a 30-second drill. So whether or not when things get difficult within your training or when you just need a little extra oomph, actually practicing a 30-second drill of saying, hey, for the next 30 seconds, I'm going to lock in, right? I'm going to finish my workout, right? I'm going to finish my bullpen with oomph, right? I'm going to just bring a heightened level of focus for 30 extra seconds. And the more that you practice that, the more often that you use that in a training scenario, 30 seconds of extreme focus, the better you're going to have access to it in game, okay, when it's needed, okay? Then also, I want you to think about your ABCs. We're not going to talk a whole lot about that now because we'll kind of talk about this a little bit more when we talk about habits, okay? But having some ABCs, okay, which are just 3 main things. They can be mental, physical, or a combination of both. But they're just 3 main focus points that are extremely important to you for any skill, okay? So make sure that you know your ABCs, and when necessary, when you feel yourself drifting, when you feel your awareness is not focusing on the right things, okay, we can come back to our ABCs and know these 3 things are most important to me, right, when I'm competing. These 3 things are most important to me when I'm training, right? And you can always kind of revert back to those. All right. We're in the home stretch here. Key takeaways. I want you to think about how awareness builds confidence. All right? Like I said at the beginning, you can't change what you don't notice. All right? And confidence comes from knowing. All right? You have to be aware of exactly what you need to improve upon, okay, in order for you to have confidence that you're doing the right things to improve upon it. Does that make sense? Okay. You have to be able to evaluate yourself with honesty. You can't be unduly hard on yourself, but you also can't give yourself passes that you don't deserve and you don't need. Okay? And then finally, I want you to remember that your awareness is going to lead to better decisions. Okay? Better decisions are going to lead to a more consistent performance. All right? So when we're constantly trying to change things, trying to improve, okay, those are the things that we need to pay attention to. All right? We have to know that growth is going to begin with your awareness. All right? Finally, before next session, 2 things I want you to chew on. Okay? What's one thing you've noticed about your preparation this week? Start paying attention to how you prepare. How do you prepare to come train? You know, some of you, we've had conversations of making sure that you fuel yourself accordingly. That starts in the morning before you even show up here. Yeah, you guys come in the afternoons, but it's not just what you do since you walk through the door. It's what you do the night before. Did you get enough sleep, right? to prepare yourself for the training session that you have to go through the next day, right? Have you fueled yourself appropriately? All right, what have you noticed about your preparation this week? Has it been good? Has it been bad? Then after you reflect on that, I want you to think about one thing that you'll change because of it. Whether or not you'll notice that you have been good at your preparation, but you want to take a step further forward, right? Or you notice that your preparation's been bad and you're going to try to fix it, okay? I want you to just start being aware of the things that you need to improve upon, things that you need to change, and start taking consistent steps in the right direction. All right? Anybody have any questions about anything that we talked about today? Nope. Very good. All right. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you. Thank you, Connor. Thank you. Thank you.